Welcome to the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve show. I'm your host, Sean Garris. Today's guest is Vern Gambetta. He is a functional sports trainer. He has worked in sports such as track and field, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, tennis, softball, swimming, and American football. Of course, mentioning all those sports, he has operated at the professional level, working with teams such as the Chicago White Sox, the New York Mets, the Chicago Bulls, and of course, the San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, the University of Michigan swim team, and let's not forget Canada's own Summer McIntosh. Sit back, pull up a seat, and get ready for this one. It's a good one. Hey, Vern, just want to welcome you to the show. But before we get started, I want to let you know how I found out about you. It was actually through Jim Richardson of the University of Michigan swim team. He had some really great things to say about you, tell you the truth. When I was chatting with him, he said that he was looking to improve his dryland training, and he reached out to you. And as a result of that, you guys built a friendship.
Yes, yeah, friendship, and I consider him. He's a go-to person when I need advice, and he's always uh, in terms of training advice and just interpersonal relationships and that. I really count Jim as a mentor too. It was a wonderful experience. I mean, he was at the point where he knew something different needed to be done, and it was courageous on his part because it was outside what was accepted at Michigan at the time, the type of training they were doing, and yeah, and so it was a mutual uh, exploratory journey that we both fed off of each other, and it 20 years later, there's a lot of athletes reaping the benefits of the things that we put out there that was, I guess in a sense cutting edge. I brought a lot of things from other sports that I've worked with that people were reluctant to include in swimming, too. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I did a little research on you, and I talked to Jim about you. I mean, he had just glowing things to say, but he actually gave me a peek into one of and you are a strength and conditioning coach. Is that the title you prefer, or is there some other
No,
title that
I actually, to be honest, I'm going to be very, I'm very straightforward. I abhor that title. I
okay?
think one of the worst things that's happened in the whole field of preparing athletes. I'd prefer to be called an athletic development coach or an athletic performance coach. You can't separate strength and conditioning. There's so many factors that go into preparing an athlete to be better that it's not just strength, it's not just conditioning. So I think it's words create images and images create action. And so if you think about that, think about, I don't know if you were a high school athlete or whatever. You mentioned your brother was a wrestler at my alma mater. You go Bulldogs.
Yes.
Conditioning, well, at least my age, you thought about, running hundreds and puking, and then strength, you were in the weight room trying to max out all the time. And it's a little more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, and that's what really kind of, when I started looking at your bio and I started looking at Gaines is the organization that you've
Yeah.
established, that works with all sorts of athletes. And let me, sorry, before we get into it, because I want to tell the audience who you've worked with. And of course, you can add, I mean, you've been in a lot of sports from track and field, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, tennis, softball, swimming, and American football. And those are not just that, I mean,
Cricket. Don't
uh,
forget cricket. I'll talk a little bit about cricket and
oh, cricket. Okay.
rugby, and both
Yeah.
both th- all three all two codes of rugby and rugby sevens. Yeah, so yeah, I've been able to touch them all except for lacrosse, which
Uh,
is a shame because it's a cool game. But anyway, yeah.
yeah. Now, have you gotten into wrestling at all?
Actually, yeah, no, I have not. No, I have not. I feel like honestly, I've learned a lot from wrestling.
Yep.
At Fresno State, we have to take a combatives class, both boxing and wrestling.
Hmm.
And there was a couple of guys I played football with that were wrestlers, and a couple of my game people are quite quite good wrestling coaches, and so a lot of the movements are things that we've incorporated in our what loosely is called sort of ground-based agility, and the wrestling piece is just super important. In rugby league and rugby union, but as far as working directly with wrestling, no, I have not. It's a great sport. Great sport.
Yeah. Well, I was thrown to the wolves with wrestling. My dad was a three-time Olympian for Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 68, 72, and 76.
Oh,
He
okay.
went
That's
to,
impressive. Yeah.
if you probably going to this, probably you're probably his age.
Yeah.
But he went to Oklahoma State, and if you
Oh
remember,
my God. If you went to Oklahoma State, that tells you right away. I mean, that's an iconic wrestling school. I mean, I followed the sport, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Arizona State, Iowa State, and then Iowa yeah. Oh man, that's impressive right there, especially at that time. Yeah.
yeah, and he ended up making all American status with them, so that was even a better great notch on his belt. I became a wrestler as a result of that, just by default. I did play football, and I did wrestle at Eastern Michigan University, but also
Oh,
prior to that in Fresno at Fresno City College with
okay.
Coach Music,
Yeah.
Bill Music. I don't know if you know that name.
I know Bill Muse. I know the name. I don't know him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
years and
They
years
had a
ago.
really good program, really good junior college program, as
Yeah.
Fresno State did at the time too, probably. And then
Yeah.
they dropped it, and then they revived it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So my brother was there before they dropped it with Dennis DeLito. But going into that, the reason why I said that is as I got into athletics, and you touched on it a little bit, but it used to be the separation, the conditioning, and the strength. And
Right.
of course, I would be the guy in the weight room. I'm a big guy. I go and push the weights, and then I would try to run because you have to do some conditioning for us.
They told you had to. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's always been that way. And even when I progressed into coaching, I kind of thought I had this background where, I worked under a personal trainer. He showed me a little bit of maybe about, maybe it kind of touched on some of the stuff that you may have been doing in your earlier years. But when I started reading your background and talking about kinetic chain,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we missed the boat on my training when it came to that.
Exactly. It probably was the strength work, if I can I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was probably more bodybuilding oriented, so I'm training upper body, I'm training chest, I'm training backs, I'm training legs, rather than, and it's a clear contrast to what we do. Is I'm interested in helping you to perform on the mat. I'm interested to help you perform on the pool. So what I want to do is how do I connect body parts, get them to coordinate, get them to sync better, so your technique is better, and and make you better at your sport. And by the way, you'll get really fit and you'll look pretty good too. But it's a different. It's looking at it through a different lens. It's toenails to fingernails rather than oh, I got to get my, like in judo, people say, I got to get my grip really strong. Well, I can have the strongest grip in the world, but if I'm not strong through the center, I'm going to be on the mat, I'm going to be losing matches all the time, so yeah.
Yeah, that you're talking about. I think it was might have been one of your books. You were talking about how when you're training for, I guess it was a runner, doing, I guess, leg extensions and leg like
Curls.
it doesn't really equate to the transfer over to sport.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important announcement.
Looking for top-tier healthcare in the GTA? Look no further than the Core Optimum Health Center. Founded by Dr. Pat Graham, official chiropractor for the Toronto Blue Jays, their clinic offers a wide range of services including physiotherapy, chiropractic care, acupuncture, massage therapy, naturopath, and more, all in a caring professional environment. They also are proud partners with the Shift Concussion Management Program, offering the latest concussion care and online neurocognitive impact testing at their Mississauga location. At the Core, your health is their priority. Visit the Core Optimum Health Center today and experience industry-leading care.
it makes you tired. It might give you bigger biceps femoris, bigger quads, but you have to look about in running, and you have to look in sprinting, jumping. What happens when the foot hits the ground? What happens literally from the foot, the ankle, the knee, the hip, and how those things connect. And so to work in those in isolation are great for bodybuilding, but you don't have the coordination of the muscles working at the appropriate time, eccentrically, concentrically, isometrically, and in sprinting, it happens all, we'll be generous and say, a tenth of a second when your foot is on the ground, So doing a lot of, slow body type of bodybuilding movements, isolating muscles, it just doesn't transfer, and that's probably one of the biggest, if I have a frustration, well, I have a frustration of myself early on as an athlete, because we, in 64 through 68, Fresno State, we didn't have, maybe we were fortunate we didn't. So I was learning all this stuff. We didn't have guidance. I was learning all this stuff on my own. So I'd go off, and 3 months I'd do this, and 3 months I'd do that. And I learned really quickly in that 3 months when I was on machines and when I was doing bodybuilding stuff. People were saying, "Oh man, you're really getting big." I couldn't move, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't move anybody else. So how do you play football? I mean, and so that made me really start the gestation of all of this started, 50, that's almost 60 years ago, really, 1965. I found some stuff. We're getting ready to move, and I found some stuff that I filed away from then, and so it's a constant learning process. I'm learning right now, and I'm working with two really, really great female athletes, one in swimming and one in cricket, one of the best cricket players in the world and one of the best cricket players ever. So you every time you look at a different sport, you look at a different athlete, male to female, it's like, okay, how do I take the principles from over here, and how do I put them into practice in the arena, so to speak, right? So, yeah, I told you I can talk. So
just keep talking. We're not gonna. We're not worried about that.
okay.
I think what you're hitting on is something. I watched a video of some of your training. I went to the swim website, this Gain Swim website, and I was watching some of the athletes there, and I was watching them do squats, but they weren't doing just squats. They were doing squats with their hands up,
overhead. Yeah.
over that. And is that what you're talking about? You're transferring, I guess, this is the training, the conditioning.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And we there's other sports we do that, but again, everything's got to transfer through the center. And in all sports, it's about making shapes and changing shapes. But a key shape in swimming is really being able to streamline and elongate. So we do some stuff with a stick overhead. Some of the teams with older kids do stuff with a bar, and it really forces you to connect your lower body to your upper body. So yeah, that's a pretty strong emphasis, no pun intended. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that. Before I started doing research on your stuff, I started watching the videos. I was scratching my head because I came from the old school of training.
Yeah.
Like, hey, why aren't they doing squats? Why aren't they doing leg press? Why aren't they doing this? They're doing these unweighted, kind of ridiculous looking squats. But there is obviously a theory. The kinetic chain needs to be worked.
Method to the madness. Yeah, and one of my axioms, Sean, is that. I implement, believe it or not, I implemented this in pro baseball, and I've implemented it in soccer, pro soccer, and that is weight room without walls. See, we create these barriers by, okay, strength training can only happen in the weight room. And so symbolically and actually by taking the walls down and being closer to the venue. So I don't know what videos you've seen, but here in Sarasota now, like right now, it's got ungodly hot, even at 6 a.m. We have an outdoor area that's part of it is covered, and that's where we do all our everything out of the water is done there. And I have a strong opinion. What I've seen too is it helps with overall fitness. I mean, we're there in January, believe it or not. It gets in the 30 degrees Fahrenheit, 35, and now it's 110 heat index, and I don't believe in mental toughness, but it forces you to really hone in on what you have to do. And then when we were in pro baseball, I primarily worked with the minor leaguers, and they traveled with some weights on the bus. They'd work out in the parking lot, So it's with pro athletes, it's never given an excuse not to train, too, was part of the philosophy. So you can get strong and fit anywhere, as evidence. I mean, again, look at history, look back, what great athletes have done before we had these palatial, frigid, air conditioned weight rooms, which doesn't prepare you for the environment that you're going to have to, to perform in. So, yeah.
I can remember training as a wrestler and going down to Cuba, and we would have the air conditioned wrestling rooms. Even when I wrestled at Eastern Michigan, same thing, an air conditioned wrestling room. But of course, Coach Gadsden would turn it down.
Yeah.
But in Cuba, it was a different atmosphere, and I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
I was thinking that it actually, it got us better for competition. Like it was, like you said, you were going into a better environment, preparing yourself for that competition because it was so much closer to what you needed.
Well, Cuba's a great example right now. I mean, they're 90 miles from the U.S., but they're in many respects they're a third world country, except in medical care and in sports and things like that. And if you look at their facilities in sports, they're primitive now. They're from the 50s and 60s, and they still are turning out great athletes. They're still turning out great athletes, and so there's a lot. I got to interact. I did a lot of consulting work for about 4 years down in Trinidad with their Ministry of Sport, and one of their athletics coaches was a really good throws coach who coached the Olympic champion in London in 2012, and got to know him really well. And we talked a lot about it, and he didn't need much. Some weighted balls, some dumbbells, some medicine balls, we did, and we needed a good Olympic set in the weight room, but that was it. And so it can be done, but I think there tends to be this, that it's primitive, it's backward if you're not using a lot of things that are shining and go bling and spit numbers out at you and things like that. I mean, some of that is really good and can really help, but I want to keep it really basic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because that's what works. Even in the weight room, I know that if we're not, going to the basics, if you want to create like some sort of hypertrophy, I always stick to the deadlifts, the things that actually work. Going to the machines kind of cheap, and you don't just get the same results. I'm assuming it's the same way. If you want real results, you got to perform the results so much closer to what sport
closer to what you're doing. Exactly.
I remember one of your quotes. I think you said it in one of the Singapore, lectures that you were talking about. But it was what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And you said what happens in the gym stays in the gym. Can you explain?
What happens in the weight room stays in the weight room, just like Las Vegas. Well, is that what we want? So I said to somebody the other day in a phone conversation, I said, well, how many hours a week do you strength train? And then I said, in the weight room. And he said, this person said 5. And I said, okay, what would I say to you that if you cut that down to 90 minutes of what you need to do in the weight room, and then another 90 minutes where we can do more movement outside, and that, and I sound like a snake oil salesman. I'm not, and I could virtually guarantee you better results. So because that's and it's not like I've against the weight room. I mean, if I were working with football linemen, we'd spend, particularly offensive linemen, a little more time there. You have to overcome resistance, shot putters. So it's all I don't think use the word so much what's specific is what's appropriate. What's appropriate? What's going to make you better? And Sean, the way I think of it, the last time I went up to the top of the mountain to get the tablets, that's a joke. And they fell and I broke them on the way down. So I'm trying to remember what was on them before they broke. And I go, here's the way. The traditional paradigm is I've got my physical preparation space, people, whatever. I have sport practice, okay, and that's where it can be even in individual skills, and then I have team practice as part of practice, and then I have the game, the match, the meet, okay. And I used to think that, okay, what I do up here in the physical preparation space directly makes me better in the game. And I go, wait a minute, that isn't the way it works. What I do in the physical preparation space is make you functionally stronger, more robust, more resilient, adaptable, so you can go to practice now. And instead of, in your case, wrestling, working on takedown moves for 3 minutes and then fatiguing, you can work on them for 6 minutes at high quality and then go into the match prepared for the match. You see what I'm saying? So it's preparing for that, preparing for the actual training, and the same thing we do in swimming. Our swimmers, because we're working on these shapes and we're working on these. So they're, first of all, 98% injury free, no shoulder problems. Although one of our good Canadian girls right now has a weird thing going on with nerve, but I'm not sure what's going on in it, but it bothers me. But anyway, because we just don't generally have those. But but they can get in the pool now, and when they're working on a particular stroke, like butterfly that requires a lot of strength and stability, they can do maybe instead of 3 times or 6 times 50 long course, maybe they can do 2 sets of 6 now or something like that. So that's how you get better, and it's so it's an investment in a process to make yourself physically more robust to be able to practice better. How's that? That's probably the best, simplest way I've ever said it. So
I like that. Even touching on the tablets.
yeah, right. Yeah.
So you had mentioned injuries, and I was watching your morning walks. That let's dissect that before. I'm not spying on you. You're on Instagram.
I wouldn't put them on if I didn't care if people listen to them. So go
So
ahead.
you were talking about injuries and how I guess they're preventable through training.
That's my experience. I don't even say opinion. I won't say what pro baseball team I was consulting with, and I thought a doctor was going to stab me with a scalpel because I said hamstring injuries, groin injuries, calf pulls, certain shoulder injuries, intercostal muscle injuries are preventable. But what happens in a lot of sports, they just expect them, EXPECT, and they accept them. I refuse to accept them. I'm very proud of the fact that the teams and the athletes that I've worked with extensively have had minimal injuries. We went. I was with the White Sox director of conditioning in the minor leagues for 9 years. We had 5 hamstring pulls. If you go online today, there's 5 hamstring pulls a week in most Major League Baseball teams. Why? There's a certain method. I just went and visited my former boss, who's in ill health, and we were talking about that. And you can't make the club in the tub, they used to say. If you're sitting in the whirlpool because you're sore or you're hurt, you can't make the club. Mm. And so that's the thing. And at times it's been career saving for some of the athletes. And it's just common sense. It's the shoulders connected to the hip's connected to the knee, to the ankle, to the foot. So let's look at what you're doing. Let's look at your technique. Let's look at the demands that are placed upon you and prepare you for those demands. But instead, what we've done today, sorry, I'm gonna get on a rant here. We've gotten so concerned about load management. Oh my God, Vern's going to get tired. Let's not do too much. Well, and now because we're not doing too much, we're having injuries because people aren't doing enough. You see what I'm saying? To prevent what you're doing. There was a terrific graphic on Facebook last week of Bob Gibson. It's 60, I can't remember what year, whatever year this was, in the middle of the 60s, he threw, I want to say 20 9-inning games. He threw over 300 innings. And in the playoffs, I think he threw 3 9-inning games. Why? First of all, he was an athlete and he trained like an athlete. He was a great basketball player. He never lost those qualities. And he threw on the days when they didn't pitch, they threw what they call live BP, to the hitters. And it was a different era. I get that. But we've gone so far the other way in virtually all sports that it's alarming to me, because if you look at injuries are not reducing. They're actually, in a lot of sports, they're on an upward curve with certain injuries. And I think it's because we're not creating robust athletes by putting a stress on them at the proper time to prepare them for competition.
What do you think? Is that part of the mental makeup of an athlete as well?
Yes, it is. But I think the best sports psychologist you have is your coach. And I think that you learn the athlete. I know my athletes. I have a lot of them here in Sarasota. When I go down tomorrow morning, it's not just summer. I have 39 other ones, and you try to get to know them, and you know who you have to push, who you have to hold back. And I you notice I'm dancing around the mental toughness, that kind of stuff. I think I think that's where one of our themes when I coached runners and now in swimming is own the finish. Nobody's going to beat us in the last 50. We are going to. You saw what happened in the last 50 in Toronto to break the world record. She had nobody there. She could have just let up and that. No, nobody will beat you, and that's the mentality we try to. So we try to. It's part of culture, and you make that upfront objectives, and you teach young people how to push the envelope without killing themselves, too. So, because I think that's and unfortunately, when I played football in college at Fresno State, it was brutality. Mm-hmm. A lot of talk about, being tough and growling and spitting and blowing snot. And, it was mindless. No, that's not what we're talking about. It's learning. I keep coming back. VHQ, very high quality. Elise Perry, who's the cricket player, one of the best in the world. One of her old themes, I've had her write it on her glove. Everything you do is very high quality. When the quality drops off, that's when you finish. That's when you move on to the next set in the workout, and that. So I know I sound a little bit, I do. I'm fanatic about that. I want high quality so it transfers to competition. I can make you tired, Sean. How quick do you want to get tired? That's what I say. You want to get minute tired? Do you want to get 30-minute tired? And you're a wrestler. You know what that's mm-hmm. like. I mean, you could turn up the heat in the wrestling room, and you were probably a 220 or something like that.
98 a while back.
98. Okay, and wrestle at 165. Mm-hmm. And go 3-minute rounds, and those guys could probably turn you every way but lose. Mm-hmm. Run you around the mat. Is that productive? To a certain extent, mm-hmm. maybe, but not to the extent at which we do it. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Now, is that similar to? I guess it was Dan Gable that kind of when he would go in the room, he would pick the toughest kid in that room and just work his butt off with that person. Is that the threshold you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the documentaries on Dan Gable. I've read his book. I think there's iconic figures in various sports that good and bad things that they did were, are handed down and copied. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of the stuff that he did was over the top, mm-hmm. in my and he's a physical mess. I mean, he's virtually a cripple. He's had every replaceable joint replaced. Yeah, I think there's some of that, is how you pair people off, your people, and like the Mamba mentality. I'm not putting down a dead guy, but so you turn the lights on in the gym at 3 o'clock in the morning. Does that make you better than if you did it at 3 in the afternoon?
No.
You have to ask yourself that now.
Yeah.
Okay. And somebody says, one of the NBA draft, I've got the Mamba mentality. Well, is your work mindful or mindless?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've worked with mindless athletes that will just work, but it doesn't. Sooner or later, you break down. Break down either mentally or physically or both. Too. So
Yeah.